right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Marty O'Donnell Show. I'm not going to give too much of an introduction, but this is one of my most favorite people I worked with while I was at Bungie. He goes all the way back to Halo 1, and he goes all the way through Destiny, the first Destiny. But he is sort of an unsung hero in my mind. A lot of people think about the original creative people behind all the Halos at Bungie. Lee Wilson was absolutely invaluable to the storytelling, to the cinematics, to the character development. He, as you will see during my interview with him today, we spent a lot of time on Halo Reach. Reach really was his baby. I think it turns out that he might have been the one who came up with the idea of even doing Reach rather than doing a continuation of the Halo saga after Halo 3. He's an absolutely gem to work with. He's British. I think this part of the reason you probably don't know him very well is because he is not only a little bit of an introvert, but because he's British, he never blows his own horn. And I wanted to change that today. I want everybody to know who Lee Wilson is and how important he is and how talented he is. So without further ado, once again, here is Lee Wilson. Okay, and here we are, the Marty O'Donnell Show. And my special guest today, I've already given him a very glowing introduction, which I always do after I've spoken to the guest.
So it depends on how I am.
It really depends on how you behave.
Yeah.
But
okay.
I'm assuming it'll be very glowing. So here he is, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Lee Wilson. Lee Wilson, welcome to the Marty O'Donnell Show.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do we have the same microphone? I think we do.
We might, yeah.
Yeah, I've got
You got a Shure something?
I
something?
do. Yeah. It's Ultimate Pro or something like that.
Ultimate. I'm sure.
Probably.
That's what it is.
Yeah. What's yours?
It's just the mediocre Pro. That's
okay.
what mine is.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah.
See, now, ladies and gentlemen, this is the one thing I want you to understand about Lee Wilson. As you can probably tell, he's got a slight accent. He's from someplace overseas. I don't know where exactly it is. But one of the things I notice about when I work with the Brits, and I've worked with several, by the way,
Okay. I know one. You never shut up about him.
there it is. See that? I waited for that. So here's an example of the way the Brits are. You probably don't know enough about Lee Wilson, and we're going to rectify that today. I'm going to make sure that people know who Lee Wilson is, what an amazing career he's had. Because the Brits they struggle with self-promotion. They just really do. Am I right, Lee? You guys just...
It's true. I do. Like, if there is a line or a cue, I will get in the back of it. It's like I don't know what it's for, but
Have you ever used the phrase, "Don't you know who I am"? That would never occur to you, I'm assuming.
I don't believe I have.
But the fun thing about Brits is, as self-deprecating as they can be, they also have the ability to be very snarky to people like me, who they feel have just gotten a little too big for their britches.
Okay.
The snark will happen, so watch for it. Sometimes it goes just over my head.
No, all the words are love words. It's have utmost or a large amount of respect.
You couldn't even come with one that didn't have snark in it. I can tell. The default snark was coming.
When we worked together, I absolutely loved it.
Oh, you know what? And I'm looking in hindsight, and as you know, I've had a few of my former Bungie colleagues on, and they've all been really fun. One of the fun parts is to go through memories I have of working together, and finding out that my memory is simply my memory and is completely wrong. You know, Hardy LaBelle, Chris Carney, Alex, Jamie, they've all like thought that I had cute memories, but then they corrected me on what the true memory is. So now, Lee, you get a chance to jump in.
To correct you.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'll do my best.
But I'm gonna jump forward before, and just to make sure people know, like the incredible impact you had, and you were so much fun working together. We worked together probably the most closely on Halo Reach.
Yeah.
And you were the main writer of Reach. Am I correct on that? I mean, I'm going to call you the main writer because, in terms of like people in, who worked inside Bungie, Reach was really kind of your script along with Peter O'Brien, which we'll
Sure.
get to.
Yeah. I mean, the story and characters. Yeah. I would never class myself as a writer. It was like I've had the honor of working with really good writers, but yeah, no, it was like I guided the story. I mean, of course, it wasn't an original story. I mean, I got the inspiration from, was it Eric Nyland's novel? So yeah.
Well, of course,
So
a
the
lot of
world
people.
existed.
Yeah, a lot of people believe you. You didn't follow closely enough to Eric Nyland's Reach novel, so because we sort of went off the concept of what Reach was, but then we went in the direction of like, look, we wanted it to be a sort of longer time period, and really bring those characters to life, the characters in Reach. And I run into people all the time, by the way, Lee. I just want you to know who were young people, junior high, high school, and their first introduction to Halo wasn't.
Isn't everyone younger than you?
Yeah, well, see, there's an example right there. That's what I had to put up with all these years. Yeah, I mean, I was Marty the Elder from the time I was 40, believe it or not.
I know. It is ridiculous. It's the crap we used to give you, and like now we're all older than that. Yeah.
That's true. I love that. That's the part I like. And I'm still kicking, and so much for you guys. You're all deteriorating before my very eyes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the impact that Reach had on so many people whose first introduction to the Halo universe was Reach, which I think is really cool. Now, Lee, I don't know if this is happening, but do you mind just moving slightly over? You sort of are at the edge.
Am I leaning?
That's better. Well, no, it's just that I think we're doing a vertical thing. I don't know. Maybe the framing will be better later.
Okay.
As a cinematic director kind of person that I am,
sure,
I'm very concerned about the whole thing.
Yeah. I'm not happy with this aspect ratio, but yeah. And
so
flip.
yes, you worked. You have a storied career. You worked with some really top people. You came out of like cinema school in New York City. Is that true?
So I did I did go to NYU. It was an intensive program, so it wasn't like it wasn't the full college experience. I did that back in England, but it was amazing. Met a lot of really good friends there who've gone on to be filmmakers and cinematographers and stuff.
And you got to work with James Cameron on something. Is that?
I never worked with him directly. Like the I guess the people that I really sort of worked with a lot were Rennie Harlin, who he was a action film director, still is. Luc Besson. I get three things that I'm always asked about, which is Twisted Metal,
right?
The Fifth Element, and Halo, of course. Yeah.
What did you do on The Fifth Element?
Storyboards.
Oh,
yeah.
Now that's interesting because did you, as a kid, were you primarily an artist? Did you was it a drawing thing?
I was. That's all I could do. Yeah. And then it's like it got me into art school, which is all I really wanted to do. My backup would be like if I couldn't be an artist, maybe a firefighter, because my dad was a firefighter.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So you did have a backup plan in case the art thing fell through.
Yeah, but nothing towards that other than a willingness.
You didn't
Yeah.
work out and carry women down
God, no.
ladders or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. Well, my dad was also like a gymnast when he was younger, and you know, like I thought that that would be in my body
Uh-huh.
automatically. So you know, I figured it was like I could do flips or something like that, but I was never able to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I think you probably knew that we've talked about this. My dad was a film director, so I actually grew up. We'd be sitting on the couch watching, movies with my dad or watching TV shows, and my dad would go, "Well, nah, it's out of sync. No, we have continuity problems. Cross the stage lines.
So he took the
Broke the
pleasure
plane."
out of film watching
Yeah, I'm
films.
like, "Dad, shut up." But no, actually, I really sort of
Oh,
enjoyed it.
sorry.
Like, there was always this sort of ability to. Uh, there was always a part of my brain that would analyze what I was watching from a sort of technical standpoint. How were the shots put together? And it was I'd watch him like at one point I asked him like, what do you mean crossing stage lines, breaking the plane, whatever that was. Like that was a concept didn't understand. And so boom, he would pull out his, pre-printed storyboard page. It was just the frames for the storyboard. He had those. He had a
Yeah,
tablet of those, right?
yeah,
And he did his own storyboards when he was doing films, which were very primitive. It was just like, a circle for a head, and wherever the nose was, that was the angle. And it was like, a two shot, a medium shot, a long shot. He would plan all his shots out that way. And then he would show me, what breaking the plane meant or crossing stage lines. And so I had that in my repertoire of understanding. So when I got to I worked in commercials and television, so I had that for a long time. Then when I got into games, it was such a shock because there was like nobody in any of the games studios that I was working with that understood any of that stuff. So I remember when we were doing Halo 1 and Joe Staten brought over these storyboards, and I was just like, oh, thank the Lord, we've got somebody who understands what's going on. Your storyboards were spectacular, by the way. So
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I've always had a weird relationship with storyboards because um, I, like you say, with your dad doing his storyboards, and that they were very sort of crude drawings.
yeah,
I prefer that, to be honest. It's like the moment that you spend any time making them look pretty
yeah,
is like there's supposed to be a communication device. I mean, I only ever spent time like making them look like really good and clear as like if they were doing if it was for stunt work or visual effects, because then you don't want them straying from what's in the frame.
right.
But other than that, it's like
But you made things so clear. Joe would have a script or a rough script, and maybe we would do a table read or something. But like, I would have trouble just with the script, the way it was put down, really sort of visualizing and getting a sense of timing and what was going to be happening in the scene. So when the storyboards came in, um, especially with Halo 1, I thought, wow, we've really hit the big time. We actually have a storyboard artist. You were sort of this mythical figure outside. This is a guy who's, worked on films, and, he's a big deal. So I just want you to know your reputation preceded you, and it was great to see those storyboards. I still have them,
awesome.
by the way. I'm sure you do too, but
I do not.
you do what?
No, I mean I had sort of copies on a disc somewhere, and then I posted them. But like, yeah, I mean, once again, I've never had a real sort of relationship with my work because it's commercial. I've sold it already, and now it doesn't belong to me. Also,
Oh,
at the time, I lived in New York, and space is limited.
well, I think it's in a folder someplace. If I look it, I'll make copies and send it to you. I mean, some of those were
I want
just
the
really cool.
originals.
Yeah, I'm sure you have the originals. I don't know
No,
who's got
I don't.
those.
Actually, I think I gave them to Staten a while back.
Oh, did you really? Oh, well,
Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah, yeah.
Oh. So how did Joe find you? Tell me the story on that. What year was it? It must have been 2001. And so how did he find you?
It was probably through because I had an agent called Famous Frames, and they just represented storyboard artists, concept artists, and yeah, he probably did a search, or however you did it back then. I can't.
Do you
Wasn't the
remember
internet.
getting contacted and deciding whether or not to take the gig? How did that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, anything game or film related, I made myself available for. Um, because the alternative was Martha Stewart lawn furniture. Which pays the bills, but it didn't blow my socks off.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah.
But at that point, you'd already worked with David Jaffe on Twisted Metal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, like that was a dream job.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was the direction I would get would just to be make it more crazy and twisted, which was fantastic.
Now, was that also cinematic stuff, or was there something else you were working on with that?
No, that was more of like the character designs, the vehicle designs, the environments, and that kind of stuff. So it was
okay.
it was much more of a concept art piece. I mean, later on, I did storyboards. I think one game that was never saw the light of day, but I kind of storyboarded the whole thing. Yeah.
So then the first time I met you, I believe you reminded me this other day when we were on the phone, but I had forgotten this. And I'm sure we can pinpoint the day because all we have to do is look up the day of the big earthquake in Seattle because you flew out from New York to meet with us or to.
Yeah, I was there for a day and a half. So the night before, it was some downtown riot going on in Seattle.
That happens all the time.
It's like any time, I especially back then, it was more of I took advantage of travel and I wanted to see the place and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
so like I wanted to go down to Pioneer Square and like that was a no go, and then we went out to. Was it the Millennium Building? I think.
Yeah, Millennium Buildings.
Yeah.
Millennium E.
Then in the middle of our discussions, we had the earthquake. So.
Yeah, because I remember you standing over by Joe's desk when my cubicle desk was over a little bit further over and in front of my recording studio, and we were standing. I think I was standing there with Jay Wineland, and I was looking at you and Joe, and then suddenly I saw the entire building start to do this sort of wavy thing, and I just froze. I'm like, I don't know what this is. Even though I lived in LA, I never experienced that kind of an earthquake. And Jay goes, "Earthquake," and he just grabbed me by the arm, and we walked into my studio under this. We had really, strong studio doors, so we stood under the door frame. And I believe you and Joe joined us there. Is that true?
How I remember it is that, yes, I had experienced earthquakes in LA, some big ones, and I saw your door frame, went for it, and I believe you pushed me out of the way.
That's probably true. Yeah.
It was kind of very George Costanza of you.
There was only room for a couple of us, and
exactly, yeah.
I didn't know who you were.
I found a table. It was fine. It was.
Well, thankfully, the ceiling did not fall.
No, there was some cool heads, and there was some not so cool heads.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I do remember that almost all the Chicago boys, the contingency from Chicago, all ran down the stairs, ran outside past all the plate glass windows, which could have killed them in an instant. And then they ran out to where the swamp or the wetlands were. And then they weren't going to come back in. They were like, "That's it. We're going back to Chicago." I remember they were petrified. Like That didn't happen in Chicago. We don't need to be here anymore. So that could have been the end of Halo right there.
Yeah. Yeah. When they happened in LA, it was a great way to meet your neighbors because you never met them, and then it's like everyone had a shared experience, and then so for like a couple of days you talk to your neighbors, and then it's back to how it was.
Yeah. Well, then, so you didn't join Bungie officially. You did the storyboards on Halo 1. Um, what else did you play Halo then after that? Because I know you were good at Halo. You certainly were good at
No, I
plasma
wasn't.
grenades.
Yeah. So I I was in New York. I was doing improv, and one of the improv teachers there, who's an amazing actor, Ptolemy, and he would do the LAN parties.
Oh,
And
really?
so, and
Okay.
so, like one time, I sort of went over, and it was amazing, and it was in a really small New York apartment. They had, it's like a TV and one TV in the kitchen, it's like one projector and that kind of stuff, and it was all comedians, so it was
Oh,
absolutely hilarious.
oh, that's funny.
And then and I was like, oh yeah, it's like, yeah, I worked on this game. It's like, because it would have been Halo 2, I guess. And like, they said, well, what can you do? I said, well, put me in a tank.
Well,
Uh,
no, if you, Halo 1 also had LAN parties. So it might have been Halo 1, depending on what year it was. You could LAN those up. You
yeah.
just couldn't do it
Okay.
over the internet.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I don't
But who
know.
knows? I don't know. I mean, it might have been
It was
Halo 2.
Blood Gulch. I remember playing
Oh,
that.
well, that's if it was Blood Gulch, it was Halo 1.
Okay. Yeah. 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 And then, so I was sort of one of the things I really missed, even though like I'd worked on a bunch of movies and that kind of stuff, it was that it was so pre-production heavy
Yeah.
that like I mean, some I would work through production, um, but generally like you sort of you at the end of production, the wrap party, you kind of you get a sort of invite, if you get an invite,
Sure.
and one person, the director, and
Right.
like so like I'm not an extrovert, so I'd be over by the cheese plate, just thinking, why am I here? um and so I think what I really missed was that collaboration
Yeah.
with people and also seeing a project through. And so I I I think I reached out to Joe, or maybe he reached out to me, and like with the idea of coming on full time. Um,
Because when you did Halo 2 storyboards, that was like another level of I don't know if he asked you to put another level of polish on it, but the art on Halo 2 storyboards was even more beautiful. I swear some of the frames you did we were essentially concept art, but still I think it was black and white. All I
it
saw was
was
black
black
and
and
white.
white. Yeah, I mean, I always, depending on what the project was that would dictate the style I did. I never really had my own style,
Mm,
and that was learned back when I was working in London for a storyboard company, because it was a studio style, so you just matched everybody else's style, um, and so I don't know. Like I read a lot of American cinematographer at the time, and wanted to be a cinematographer or a director, and I realized that, oh yeah, cinematographers have a big discussion about what the project is, what it's about, and like they make decisions on the style of how they're going to shoot it. It's not their style, so
hmm
it supports the material. And I think with Halo 2, um, it was less prescriptive as far as shots, and more about the sort of how things happened. And so it was I think it was a little bit more like a comic book in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the Halo 2 storyboards could be published like a graphic novel. I mean, they're you wouldn't want to do that. I see that. I saw that look. But I really
I can't
enjoyed it.
stand looking at my work.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's horrible.
I
Yeah.
swear there's an image of Cortana screaming or something that is
Oh, yeah. Well, every now and then there was a good one, a
there
good
you
panel.
go. See,
Yeah.
look, you're so self-deprecating. Your storyboards were an inspiration to us all, especially after Joe threw this, 1,000 page script at us. I was just like, Joe, what?
I
We can't
I
do
do
this.
I do remember because it's like talking about taking on great gigs.
Yeah,
Halo 2 was definitely good to me because I storyboarded it and then I storyboarded it again.
at least twice.
I was like, okay, I'll do this again. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the production process, so called for Halo 2, was pretty scary, and you and I both know the original story of Halo 2 and the original ending. You storyboarded it. I, cast the actors and actually recorded the entire original script all the way to the end. Um, with the Prophet of Truth and the Dervish.
That's
Um,
right. Yes. Yeah.
So I have that. I have even, I think well, I shouldn't admit that I have these recordings. It's possible those recordings still exist someplace. But of course, they belong entirely to Microsoft, so I don't have them.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, there was the ending of Halo 2 was completely different. Reality, smacked us upside the head, and suddenly the whole basically last third of the game was cut. And hey, Lee, can you help us re-storyboard how we're going to shoot this ending, which was quite a bit of work. We supposedly didn't change the fact that humans are forerunner. I don't know if you've ever heard. Have you run into this controversy with the fans, the Halo fans out there?
I I remember one thing where like I think Master Chief finds some kind of tomb and there is a skeleton, a
Yeah,
human skeleton.
yeah.
So
I can't
yeah.
remember if Chief or the Dervish found that, but yes,
Oh,
that's what it was. It was a
yeah,
human
yeah.
skeleton, which proves you are forerunner. Humans are forerunner. That was always what we thought was.
I always liked the idea, especially like when you sent basically like the 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 sort of this package of the remainder of humanity with like Master Chief, who is like kind of this well, he's this obviously this super soldier, but like kind of manufactured to a certain degree, and then like this super AI computer that potentially, like depending on how space and time works, he could have been the forerunner.
Mm. Oh, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, like literally. Okay,
You
not
know,
just a descendant. Yeah.
I've always liked the full circle stuff. So
Well, there's actually somebody's done a really nice video on sort of the arc of the three Halo games that we made, and the fact that Halo is a circle and that we come full circle, and we at the end the Chief goes back in the cryo chamber, and I think we did a nice job considering the fact that we were only planning on making one Halo. We never had the this decision. There was never a decision that we should make a trilogy with its an epic grand trilogy with a beginning, middle, and end, and it comes all the way back to full circle. That's something that happened organically. But I think especially with when we did Halo 3, it gave us that opportunity to like tie up all those ends, those loose ends that we had sort of dangled out there for at the end of Halo 2. Now this brings us to the point where now we're like, Lee is so valuable to us. We're going to hire him. We're going to ask him to move him and his wife. I don't think he had kids yet, right?
no,
No. You were married.
yep,
Yes. And we were asking you to move to Seattle and join Bungie. And really the only person you'd had personal contact with was Joe Staten at that point. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And so what happened when you first arrived
I
at
know what
Bungie?
you're queuing up here. I'm not sure Joe would want me to say.
Well, I mean, you don't have to go into super detail, but I mean, you know.
Well, Joe was on a hiatus, and so like yeah, I showed up and like it made sense that I'd be plonked in the cinematics department, and I, you know, the plan was for me to storyboard everything, you know, like the meetings and all that kind of stuff. But then it was also like it would be good for me to learn how cinematics are made. It's like I knew nothing about how video games are actually made. So like that, it was that was all a mystery to me, and the fact that like you know I was used to film cameras and you know lights that I could grab and
real light,
and
tangible light,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, you know, like lighting the cinematics by typing in the coordinates of where they would be in three-dimensional space and where they would be pointing, and it was like that kind of blew my mind. Yeah.
Well, by that point, we had CJ
Yep.
Cowan, who was also on the cinematics team, and I believe Halo 3. We had moved to no. See, we started at Millennium E, but we finished Halo 3. I think we were in Kirkland. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, actually, I think
Yeah, we were in Kirkland
we
by the time we finished Halo 3. But didn't we start it? Did you came in 2005? Were we in Kirkland yet, or we were still?
no.
Oh, we were still in Millennium. Okay.
Yeah.
And Joe was on hiatus. He was writing his novel on Sergeant Johnson, which was
That's right. Yeah.
he did come back during the Halo 3 time period to work with all of us on the Cinemax. Halo 3 was a bit of a interesting period because we had some leadership issues, let's just say. Like who exactly was directing this game? Who was creative director? Who
I love that you always talk about Camelot. It was like, yeah, everybody was fighting over who sits at the head of the round table. It was
exactly.
like, is that what you mean by Camelot?
Should it be round? Maybe it should be rectangular. I mean, yes. I do have rose-colored glasses. I realize that. I guess I call it Camelot compared to other things. But as I think back on some of the good times during the Halo development 10-year period, there were a lot of good times. And actually, I remember the first thing we did was like, oh gosh, Joe's not here. Joe hired Lee. Lee didn't know that Joe's going to be on hiatus the day he shows up. And I think it was me and CJ took you and your wife out to dinner. Is that one of the first things that happened?
Yes. Yeah.
And you were sort of like, what have I got? I just could remember looking at you and you were like, why am I here? The only person I work with is not working on this game.
And I've just taken my actress wife out of New York. Yeah. It's like...
Yeah, for the big booming actor city of Seattle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It does have a nice stage
it does. Yeah.
community there. So
Yeah.
that's where I got Sergeant Johnson, David Scully, and Jen Taylor, and
Jen, yes,
yeah, they were both, always working on stage in Seattle, and they were great. Yeah, so that's interesting. So your role on Halo 3, what was your actual what was your role on Halo 3? You obviously you weren't
like
just
cinematic designer, I think.
Is that what? Okay,
I think
yeah.
that's what you'll call me.
Because if I remember correctly, it wasn't CJ called cinematic director, and then you were cinematic design or whatever. But I mean, we all kind of contributed. And there was a whole mess of.
Yeah, I wasn't doing any directing on Halo 3. It's like I think I was kind of at the beginning and at the end because like I knew like once I knew that I was going to be doing the lighting of the cinematics,
Yeah.
then it was like, oh, okay, like then that dictates how I would do the storyboards. So
Yeah.
in that case, they were color and they were kind of lit, and they were probably the prettiest of the cinematics because
Oh,
I was setting up a kind of a color journey sort of thing.
that's interesting. It's funny. I bet you I don't have any of those. I don't remember seeing those
You didn't
storyboards as much
you
as
didn't
you and
squirrel
CJ
those
were.
away?
I just threw those out. I was like, what is this color thing? Um, no, I'm trying to remember. There was so many the script writing and story writing process in quotes
Uh-huh.
Camelot. Of course, it was Camelot.
Yeah, yeah.
Of Halo
Fictional
3 was
history.
pretty
Yeah,
funny.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well,
It,
actually, they would have all been digital anyway, so
oh,
that's
okay.
that's why you couldn't grab them.
Probably. I didn't have a computer. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah.
You always like going through our garbage, looking for the scraps of paper to hold on to.
And then I'd autograph them and sell them. That's
Exactly.
what I
Yeah.
like to do.
Yeah.
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 And take credit for them, as you know.
Of course. Well, as you should. I mean, it was like it was a like the ideas flow through you.
Well, one of the things that happened on Halo 3 was I remember there was because Joe, who had been the writer, the sort of the main conduit writer for Halo 1 and 2, we didn't have Joe at the beginning of Halo 3 for a good 18 months, I believe. There was like the story committee that was sort of writing the
Yes.
story. I
Yes.
believe you were on that committee, but I wasn't. I remember that. Were you on that committee?
I well, I probably wasn't an official committee member. I was like the person I could uh, seen and not heard most of the time. Although I was allowed to say a couple of things. But yeah, most of it was, hey, let's discuss. Then I would go and do some. I would take notes, go
Yeah.
and do some storyboards, and then the next day or the day after, we would put those up on the whiteboard, and then like that would be a sort of jumping off point.
Well, I remember when there was some point where I've talked about this before, but the story committee had sort of here's the story, here's the outline, here's what's going to happen in the game, and everybody sort of, uh, um, you know, the leads were going to sign off on this thing, and everybody was like, "Yeah, this is good," and I remember thinking, "This is not good. I don't know where's Lord Hood? He was gone. Miranda wasn't there." And nobody died. But the point was we were supposed to like make people believe that somehow Master Chief might die at the end of this game. And I was just like, this isn't going to work. We haven't we were losing Ron Perlman, who was a great actor, and he was Lord Hood. So I'm like, let's bring in Lord Hood. Let's have Miranda back. We need to kill Miranda. We need to kill 343 Guilty Spark. We need to kill Prophet of Truth. And we need to kill Sergeant Johnson. And that way, everybody's going to believe that maybe Master Chief is going to die. And it was funny because when I came up with those were just plot points. Like I was not writing anything. I was just like, let's just insert these plot points into this thing. And I presented it to each one of the people on the story committee as an individual. Hey, come in. I just want to ask you how you feel about this. And everybody, Rob Stokes, CJ, I think Michelle Bastien was producer on it. And I don't remember if I did that to you too. I remember if you came in and I said, what do you think about this? Do you have any recollection of this thing happening? Because I sold it to every one of those guys and they were all like, yeah, I wanted that to happen too, but nobody else on the committee wanted it. And so I finally got everybody on the committee to agree outside the committee. And then then the script was sort of rewritten with that stuff in mind. Do you remember any of that?
I do remember those kind of shenanigans that you would have to. Yeah. No, yeah, I remember being summoned to the office and the soundproof office.
It had to be soundproof. Come on.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I do remember that kind of thing, because yeah, I guess I remember it post those insertions, because
Yeah.
like I I don't know if I sort of remember, nobody dying.
Well, it's possible. I'm sure in the original story, the Prophet of Truth died. But believe it or not, 343 didn't turn on it. 343 Guilty Spark, I don't think turned on us. I don't think Sergeant Johnson got killed. Sergeant Johnson definitely didn't get killed. I take responsibility for killing Johnson, which, by the way, when Joe came back into this to the picture and was then like asked to work on the actual script, so we actually, the dialogue. I think Rob Stokes and Joe worked quote unquote together on the script. Um, I remember Joe coming to me like, "Are you out of your mind? You're killing Sergeant Johnson." Like he just finished writing this book on Johnson. Johnson, I think, was his favorite character.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Joe, yeah, he's got to go. He's got to die. I don't know how I ended up having enough pull to make that happen. But there are still fans out there that actually hate me because I killed Sergeant Johnson.
I don't know. I was like, and especially in video games, I do love to kill favorite characters, because, well, one, it makes you appreciate them. Like they don't get old and boring, and so I didn't say that.
Okay.
Yeah, but they get to be, like, you get to remember them, and and you sort of build a kind of more of a history around them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I still think, I mean, I think it's possible that, we if I had anything to do with any sort of Halo anything, I think there would be a way of telling other stories in the Halo universe, and Sergeant Johnson could easily be a main character, in my opinion.
I'm the same way with Reach.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a thing that, obviously, like, one of the characters, George, does the slip space thing instead of a bomb.
Yeah.
And I, like, a little while ago, I thought, it's like, I would love to do a story about him, like, if he was still alive. It was like, I wonder what the fans think. And, like, sure enough, you go on the forums and it's like, there's so many theories about him and that he might still be alive. So, like,
It was slip space. Like, who knows?
yes.
It's a black hole right
Yes,
there.
yeah. And any time you sort of, like, leave something unanswered, it just validated, like, yeah, you gotta leave all these, like, little loose threads every now and then, and people love it.
So, George, you mean Jorge?
I've met people called George with the J.
Was that a creative choice on your part? Like, where did
It was. It
was okay.
Yeah, because, I mean, it was the way I saw it is that, like, always people were just kind of like a mishmash of various influences. It's like,
Sure.
it was the same thing with, like, the making, like, Reach. Like, there was a lot of Hungarians, because
Right.
it's like they were in the mining and that kind of stuff, and so, like, it gave it sort of more of a sort of a rich tapestry,
Mhm.
and sort of made it sort of more grounded. And yeah, it was like, it just felt that, even as far as names are concerned, it's like, if somebody, we experience it all the time now. It's like people have got all sorts of different spellings of their
Yeah.
names. So.
Well, so now we're up to the Reach time period, and so it's interesting. So through Halo 3, you developed a lot more of your game design chops in terms of the technology and working with the tools and all the rest of it. So you and Marcus right away started working. It was a small team. What was the team? It was like you, Chris Carney, Marcus,
Joe Tung.
Joe Tung, of course. Yeah, that's right.
Yep. Christian Allen. Yeah. I think right at the beginning,
Right.
there was that. No, the Halo Reach was sort of born out of a carpool with myself, Chris Carney, and Joe Tung, because those two were sat up in the front and they would jammer on about like they wanted a multiplayer only
Did
Halo
Chris have
game.
a booster seat? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I don't know why I was sat in the back, but that's
Okay.
I probably volunteered to be in the back.
So the reason
Yeah,
I'm,
yeah.
as an aside, we're going to go back to this carpool because actually the
Sure.
carpool sounds like a little piece of Camelot to me. I have a feeling those were really magic times, but
Oh gosh, yeah.
um, there were a couple of people in the studio that would use Photoshop to do images of different people within the studio and trade them around. Paul Russell was one, and you were one who were renowned for using Photoshop and other artistic tools to make images, let's say, of me with looking like Beethoven. And then the number of Chris Carney memes that came out between you and Paul Russell are legendary. So, do you feel
I
bad about any of those by any
I
chance?
feel like I was gentler than Paul Russell.
It's a low bar.
Yeah. Paul Russell was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I generally like to go for the subtle that you don't necessarily see it right away.
Yeah, that's that snark I was talking about, or the
Yes.
hidden snark. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Like maybe changing the sizes of people, and you think, why is
Is
that
that right?
person so big? Yeah.
So, yeah, so the carpool, and that's so. We knew Marcus was going to be. I think we had already sort of decided Marcus would be the project lead or the creative director
Oh
of
yeah,
Breach.
yeah.
Did you come to Marcus with like an outline, or how did that work?
So yeah, while Tung and Carney were arguing in the front, I was sitting in the back, and I had just read Eric Nyland's the Fall of Reach, and they were
Okay.
talking about like it's multiplayer, so it's lots of Spartans.
Okay.
It can't be you know Master Chief was the last of the Spartans. It can be only one. So it's like, well, there was a whole bunch of Spartans on Reach, and it could be a kind of cool. It's like it doesn't have to be anything about Master Chief. We don't need to go off on different planets, and and it can also be at a time when we didn't really see the aliens, from their perspective at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
It was like, what did it feel like to have, to kind of be attacked? And so it kind of dictated that it would be kind of like a war, that it would be something that would sort of happen in the past, and like things were out there in the universe, like Saving Private Ryan and that kind of thing. And it's like, oh yeah, it's when you depict like something that has happened in the past, then once again it's okay. Like as a viewer or a player, you're okay with those characters dying, because like you don't need to see them be old or that kind of stuff. It's like that it was a glorious death and
When
sacrifice.
Yeah, and when did we I'm trying to remember because ODST was being sort of developed at the same time Reach was, but it was a different team that had to split off and take care of this
What? Yes,
obligation of ODST, but
it
the
was.
work on Reach started first. I think work on Reach started
Yeah,
first.
because it was I forget what the Peter Jackson project was called.
Crazy Town.
My it's funny. My little I still had my production spidey sense back then, and I felt like that the Peter Jackson thing would never work. Mostly because, like, seeing him work on like Lord of the Rings and all that kind of stuff, that guy doesn't do anything by heart. So,
Right.
like, if he's got a movie out, which was King Kong at the time,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
he was just starting that, and it's like, there's no way he would, like, he's not gonna like half-ass our project. So
Right.
he's gonna choose King Kong. So it's I felt like it would never work.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but because I was sort of involved in the negotiations with Microsoft about what Bungie's obligations were in order to buy ourselves back.
Hmm.
We wanted originally we wanted it very simple. We'll give you Halo 3, you give us Bungie back, and then we're done. And then we needed to like, well, actually, we need to figure out a way to make it a little more money so we can actually take this entire huge studio and start working on Destiny. So we agreed to do two other projects. One was being called Halo 4, and the other was this sort of amorphous middle thing. So we were going to do Halo 3, Halo 4, and this amorphous middle, we called it the middle bucket. There were three buckets. And the middle bucket was going to be the Peter Jackson game project, not the movie. The movie we had nothing to do with, but it was going to be Peter Jackson's Weta Digital Game Studio that they were going to develop, and we would assist on that. And that was part of our getting free contractually. And
Okay.
I had the same spidey sense you had. I'm like, that ain't going to happen.
I mean,
And
it was really hard turning down a trip to New Zealand, and
I didn't get to go either, but did you, were you almost going? I know Bertone and
yeah, I think I was. You know, I would have been. I was gonna go, but like then it was like I because I was like so excited about Reach. I was like, I really want to like see this through.
yeah.
And it was my opportunity to do that. So,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Well, because I remember when Joe and Paul Bertone came back from New Zealand, I had made sure that we had a clause in the contract that said if Peter Jackson's project somehow blows up and flakes out, we're not obligated to do that second thing. And somehow that particular part of the contract got written out without my awareness. And I remember when Harold came to me and said, "Hey, Microsoft is still holding us to the second project," and I'm like, "But there is no second project." And he said, "Well, now there is." And so that was after we'd already started working on Reach, but was like, nope, there's still some part of the studio has to work on this ODST project, which I remember Joe and Paul immediately had an idea of what to do, which I thought was great.
That was
But what was funny was
amazing that they could pull that out of,
Yeah.
out of the
I mean,
hat.
totally.
Yeah.
But for me, I was just like, oh my gosh, there's no way we can do these two things simultaneously. I hate this idea. I hate this whole project. And actually, both ODST and Reach are two of my favorite things we ever did at Bungie. So it somehow did work out. But there was some
Well, I think
fear and trepidation going on there.
And I think also, like, you know, like there was obviously like a lot of big personalities, but like by taking those teams and both had like really worthwhile projects and that needed all of their attention. Like everybody was able to like really sort of work on something. And it was less about like nobody had to wrangle for position or anything like that. And so I think both of those projects really like what shipped is pretty much what was concepted.
Yeah,
which is
that's
amazing.
true.
Yeah, which
the
is very
production
rare.
process on both of those was much smoother. I think we had learned a lot, and I think you might be right. Actually, potentially separating a couple of the personalities. You know, I remember Jamie Griesmer had gone upstairs to work with Jason on Destiny, so it was Marcus and his crew, which were very unified. You guys were very unified, and then Paul and Joe were unified and had a much smaller crew for ODST. And having those kind of big creative personalities separated in the studio, I never really thought about that before, but that might have been the best.
Well, and also also there was the aspect of like the timing, especially for Reach, and I forget what, but basically, like we started off as a very small team, and then like we gradually built it. So like
Yeah.
we had a good foundation. So whenever people were onboarding, they actually really understood it, and so it was kind of like more like a movie production
Yep.
where you're hiring people as needed rather than like cart before the horse.
And going back to the working on Halo 3 story and the sort of mess that ended up, or during the production ended up being that way. I feel I'm still proud of what Halo 3 turned into. I still think it's
Sure,
solid.
yeah, yeah.
But part of that, I think, was, believe it or not, Jim McQuillan's idea was we need to get Joe back writing the script because Joe contributes things to the script that are super important. So we got Joe, and it was going to be Joe and Rob Stokes were going to work together, and that working relationship was not necessarily the most ideal one ever. And so he pulled in this friend of his that he knew, Peter O'Brien, who was a Hollywood screenplay writer, to just sort of be the story editor of Joe and Rob. I don't
Oh,
know if
so
you
this
remember
was
that
on Halo 3?
on Halo 3. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Do you remember that? But we had meetings at Jim's house.
I don't remember when I first met Peter O'Brien.
Okay. He
Yeah.
he came in a number of times, but was pretty much outside the studio and just worked with Joe and Rob on the script. And that's
Yeah,
when I met
okay.
Peter, and I
Yeah.
I just sort of fell in love with Peter. I thought he was
Oh,
just brilliant.
he's a
And
wonderful
so
person. And
when you got so let's go now to Reach. So now we're post 2007. We're working on Halo 4. Originally, Halo 4 would be the continuation of the Master Chief and Cortana story, and nobody in the studio wanted to do that. That's what I remember. We were all like,
yeah.
we finished the Master Chief Cortana story. We can't pick it up and do it in one game. If this was ever to happen again, it would have to be a trilogy or something big. Who came up with the idea of saying, "What about Reach? Why not do a prequel?" Do you remember whose brilliant idea that was? It wasn't mine. I can't take credit for that one.
Well,
I could, but I won't.
okay. So as I'm going to do what you do,
Good.
according to
Self-promote,
my
buddy.
memory, I was sat in the back of the car and I suggested Reach, and the reason being is like I think the other thing was that we really wanted something where the story was in service of the gameplay, and I think like not that it was necessarily the other way around with the Halo games, because it was nicely balanced, but like we didn't want to do the carry on doing the Master Chief story because like we'd created such a world. We'd already created like like if you're gonna do Master Chief, then you've got to like like the elites have got to be speaking, and then the brutes, and like you've got all that sort of stuff that you've that people are going to expect. Whereas if you literally like make a game where like I mean, how I would describe it, it's what it feels like to be a Spartan.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it was like, and like that, and like that dictated everything. Like and like I think that's something that Marcus, like really believed in and championed, and so once he, like was on board with that, then it made every sort of creative decision a whole lot easier, really. I mean, it influenced how I would shoot the cinematics. Like, it was it was a lot more sort of documentary feel, boots on the ground, all of that kind of stuff.
So then I remember when the idea of we're going to do this prequel, the fall of Reach the game is going to be Reach. And I remember just feeling like, oh, great. Now we have so much more freedom to decide things. We can, the elites will be back. And I remember the decision, well, they don't have to speak English now because we don't, for some reason, we're further back in time, so we don't understand what they're saying. The humans didn't have the translation possibilities. And so the grunts and the elites were not going to speak English. So that was an extra little layer of difficulty. But I remember just feeling like this is going to be really interesting to do a story where everyone who's going to play this knows how it's supposed to end, already knows it's going to end tragically. It's the Titanic. And you and I have talked about this before. Like, I don't know which one brought up the Titanic first, you or me, but we were both very excited about the idea that we would, from the beginning, the end. So like
Yes.
that was just a cool puzzle to solve. And then we knew that the player would have to really die at the end. And before we get up to that, I want you to think about how we came up with the mechanism to make you feel like you're actually dying, because that was, I loved that. But it was
that,
just
that
cool.
one I definitely can't I can't take credit for, because like my original version in my head was that the once you see the mountain,
Yeah.
then you know that that's where you died. And so it was, like more of a sort of like, oh, at the end of that mission. But like the fact that we could have a bonus mission,
Yeah.
I was like, that was the way that turned out was amazing. So it's
Well, I'll jump forward to my memory of this. One of the things was we had done, by the time we were getting towards the end of Reach and the planning for it and the whole thing, I just remember, and this is my personal feelings, whether there were other people saying the same thing to Marcus and you guys and Joe Tung and Carney and the people working on the game, was that I'm like, let's remember our players. Our players have been playing as Master Chief and then as characters in ODST, and physically they have died thousands of times. And every time you die in Halo, we pay no attention to your death. You just immediately respawn at where you were successful. So you are used to being killed, but you've never died, right? And I said, how in the world, when one of the mechanics we have in a game is the character that you're playing constantly being killed, how are you going to make the final death actually feel like a real death? And I'm not sure if I just posited that conundrum or if I was just reflecting a conundrum that everybody knew. But I remember when my recollection is that Marcus came to me, or Marcus and Tung or something, and they described that it might have even been Chris, the designer that you talked about before.
oh,
Anyway,
damn it! Everybody was called Chris at the time.
Opdal, Chris, yeah, we said it the same time.
Yes,
Chris
yeah.
Capdal, yeah.
Yes.
Email. Anyway, I forget how it was, but it was this idea that like the final mission would be after the credits or whatever. I can't remember what the order we did things in, but it was certainly after the ending where you saw Master Chief and Cortana, but then you were back on the planet and it just said survive. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so great, because there's going to be a point you could make that mission as long as you were skilled enough to survive, but eventually you'd be running out of ammunition and weapons, and the enemies would get more and more. You would die eventually.
Yeah.
And you knew that cracked helmet was the last image because we started with that. And it was such a beautiful, I just thought, wow, however that came together as an ending to the entire Bungie era of video games, in the Halo universe, I thought that was just gorgeous, because we were able to do that last sort of coda scene. And when you died, you really feel like your character had died. And I love the fact that we didn't show the actual plasma sword or whatever it was going through.
Yeah. I mean,
framed
that was
just
Pat's
gorgeous.
animation at the end. It was
Okay.
like, oh my gosh, it was absolutely amazing. Yeah. But
it was a pleasure for me to be able to like work on every part of that game. But let's go back to, so you don't remember, it just felt like it was not a committee, but like it was the stew of people adding ingredients to the stew. We came up with it as a collaborative effort.
well, I mean, and that was the thing. It was such a brilliant idea because I mean, like the whole thing was like, yeah, you know, we were going to just end it with a cinematic, but it was like the whole idea of Reach is that you got to play as much of the game as possible as the player, and like you know, as you know, it's like, you know, convincing people to make another mission is not easy. You're usually cutting missions, not adding missions, and so like the fact that could get done was terrific. And
so that I'm very proud of that ending and just the way the whole thing flowed. Well, I don't want to complain, but like I still believe that the best way to play the original Bungie Halo games is on the original versions that we had, because the end credits are in there. We always use the end credits cinematics as part of the user as the, you know, the audience's experience. So it was like, it was a place to, you know, sort of absorb what you just went through. It gave you time, gave you space, and we almost always had some coda, some extra thing at the end of the credits that could either attract you to the next game we were thinking we might make, or just give you a real good sense of closure. And you can't play it that way currently on the Master Chief Collection. None of the games play the way we designed them. With the loading screens, with the title screens, with the end credit. There's no end credits in any of the Halo games on Master Chief Collection. I don't know if you knew this or not, but
I did not know that.
Yeah. No, you know, as a filmmaker, how important the flow from very beginning to the very end is. Mm-hmm. And
well, plus that's when the music turns up, isn't it?
Well, I kept the music up pretty much throughout. Yes. But I mean, I just feel like I would totally want you to go online and start watching some YouTube videos, streamers, especially some of these young people, and they're, you know, there's a bunch of different women that have decided, you know, they're 23 years old or something, and they're gamers, and they've decided, well, I've never played Halo, so they start with Halo 1 and they go all the way through all the Halos through Halo Reach, and they film themselves playing. So it's a streaming of them playing through all these games. You'd get a kick out of it if you, especially watching the Reach playthroughs. Yeah, just to see these people in real time respond verbally. They're showing their emotions. You know, they play through the game with their little screen, you know, their picture on the screen of them responding and talking. And it's very satisfying to see them experience it kind of the way we hope people would experience it.
Yes, because generally, like especially when you ship a product, all you focus on is all the things that you sacrifice, that like you know, it's not quite how you wanted it to be, and like you can't stand to watch it, or I just need to have a break.
Yes, exactly.
I don't want to look at a computer screen. And so, yeah, it wasn't until recently that I did watch a YouTuber filmmaker, and he played through the whole thing, and like I realized, oh yeah, you know, I haven't sat down and watched all the cinematics of Reach, probably not since before ship.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was wonderful to see this guy appreciate all the little details we put in. So it's wonderful.
Well, I think Reach probably was that was definitely I think from a storytelling and cinematic production standpoint, it was probably the pinnacle of our. I mean, I think we're really firing on all cylinders, and it stands up. It's really amazing.
Well, and it was also an opportunity to get a little bit more emotional because, you know, like most of the Spartans took their helmets off, which was
except for Noble Six, except until the very end.
Well,
I
and
love that.
Emil. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Emil never took his helmet off. That's right.
Yeah.
But when
Well,
I picture Emil, I picture the actor of, oh my gosh, he was in The Wire. You remember? Well, we'll talk about casting for this game
oh my
in a
gosh.
second. But that
Yeah,
was so much fun.
Jamie Hector.
Jamie Hector. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
I picture Jamie Hector, but I forget that he never took his helmet off. But
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't not see Jamie in my head.
Yes. I mean, Emil was I kind of based him on Robert Vaughn in The Magnificent Seven.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So the fact that he's
With the knife.
he's flashy, but like he doesn't. But there's a little bit of cowardice there, and he's
That's right. Robert Vaughn was
overcompensating.
he was the
He
gun
had
shoot
and the gloves and that
and
kind
the
of
gloves.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
James
yeah.
Coburn was the knife
the knife.
guy.
James Coburn was the knife guy.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Emil was that other cocky. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted like that there was a little bit of like he's overcompensating for insecurity.
So going back to the writing process on Reach, I don't remember when this happened, but there at some point during that period, we had to really figure out who was going to write the script, and you were. I don't think you wanted to write the script completely by yourself. I don't remember how we came up with it. Let's bring up Peter O'Brien, but I knew Peter from working with Halo 3, and we brought him up, and I think you and Peter started talking, and immediately I remember you guys just hitting it off, and it's like,
Well,
okay, he's got to be the guy.
Well, between then it was Frank O'Connor because
That's right.
because Frank was going. I mean, he wrote a complete draft as well, and so like like I had already sort of worked really closely with Frank anyway, so like that was the ideal scenario, and then he left, so it was kind of like and you brought up Peter O'Brien, and I think I can't remember if I had actually met him, but like once I met him, it was like, oh my gosh, yeah, the opportunity to work with someone of his caliber was wonderful, and like my approach is always to be be in a room with people that are much smarter than me.
Well, I know that we ended up getting Peter ended up getting a condo like 5 minutes walk from Bungie, and you and Peter were up there for months, right? I mean, that's what I remember.
We had a couple of offices. One was the bar. There was a margarita office as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to be mean here. I just want to be accurate.
Yes.
So yes, I know Frank worked on the beginning of the Reach story, and you guys worked together. To what degree? How much do you think of the original Frank O'Connor version is the final version that you and Peter did? What percentage? Do you think? I'm just curious. It's
I don't. I can't remember.
Okay.
I mean, it's like I think. So I wrote a draft that was a real mess. But it's kind of the same my same approach to storyboards. It was like,
Sure.
let's get it all out, and like we also did, like when we were all working in that room, it's like here are like the potential missions that we could have.
Yeah,
So
right.
like
You always got that part
So
on
that was
top.
always going to dictate like
Yeah.
the order of things as well.
I remember those missions were on sticky notes, and they would get turned.
Oh,
would
yeah,
be better
yeah.
to do this here and this here, and then I'm like, what's that going to do to the story? You guys had to keep adjusting.
Well, and that was the thing. It was like as long as we had our sort of little sort of pillars,
Yeah,
then the idea was that the story would be very fluid if we needed it to be. And like you could. The other thing is that, well, if you've got all these Spartans, we're used to playing solo, can we pull it off where you're playing with a, Spartan buddy or two or three,
Yeah, like on the beach.
and then they don't, shoot all the targets that you wanted to and all that,
Right.
and or act completely dumb.
Yeah.
So it was, like there was a lot of unknowns. So I mean, I remember Frank, being able to like take that and like kind of put it in an order, and sort of flesh out some of the characters and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, at the time, it was still, it it didn't necessarily have a structure or a kind of a through line, and like that's something that Peter really introduced.
Well, I remember one of the insights Peter had when it was at some point I was talking to Peter, and he said, "Well, there are two sort of archetypes that we are dealing with in Reach. One is the Magnificent Seven, which is character driven, and each character is unique, but it's the villagers that are the victims, and the victims that's who needs to be saved. And then there's the Saving Private Ryan archetype, which is sort of the buddy picture with these characters that all have their unique identities, but you learn about who they are not through their action, but you learn about who they are during the down times. And I remember him saying we still haven't kind of landed on which one Reach is. I'm not sure if we really did land on that. How do you agree with that? Do you think we did? Where do you think we landed?
So I agree with sort of both versions, because like if it were a movie, then you would make it about the villager.
Yeah.
And like because then like you could have a lot of screen time with like the character Sarah, and like like
which we did at one
yes,
point. There was a lot of Sarah.
Yes, and see it sort of through her eyes and that kind of stuff. But you're also very limited to like when you have those cinematics. If the player is going to watch for cinematics, or if they're going to skip it and that kind of stuff. And so like it's a completely different format with a video game. So like to make someone care deeply about an NPC that it's like it doesn't matter. It's like like how good of technology you have at the time, you're not going to relate to them like a sort of a really sort of intense human performance. So it's so it was better that you sort of focused on that camaraderie of the team, and like and then the sacrifice, and then like like by if someone dies, then you take that away from the player, and like they feel it. Like if an NPC dies, they didn't provide anything other than story.
Right. Yeah, and it is interesting to see the different way we handle the deaths. George was this huge dramatic moment of self-sacrifice, and then it was all for naught. I mean, that's one of the most depressing, I think, scenes we ever shot, was after he tell him to make it count. He throws you out the bay, and as you're floating back to Earth, you see all those capital ships just pop in. And
well, the other tragedy with George was that, like, out of anyone, he is the one who wanted to die on the surface of Reach.
That's true. That's right. Yeah. So, well, you're going to make me cry. But then,
because he spoke Hungarian, he was from Reach.
He understood.
Yes.
And then the death that I thought was is the most shocking death I think we have, other than maybe Sergeant Johnson's death, which people can't believe happens when it happens. And immediately, of course, I love it because they hate Guilty Spark. Finally, he's not just an annoying little light bulb. He is this laser beam shooting killer of Sergeant Johnson. I mean, just instant hatred of 343 Guilty Spark. Which is interesting that they decided to name their company 343 Guilty Industries. I never understood that. Anyway, moving on, is the death of Kat. Tell me about how important Kat's death was. And I've been watching people play that scene, and then seen other people sort of analyze it, and they're picking up on lots of little subtle hints of what Kat does. And I know this all basically came out of essentially your head, right?
Sure.
Well, explain it. Tell us. That's what you were thinking.
I'm going to explain it. Well, one thing I because it's wartime, I definitely want to, like, it's like one of those moments where like someone is there and then they're not,
Right.
and it's like it's and and especially like a character that you really like, and so it's really hard to shock a player.
Yeah, it's true.
There was going to be a character called Rosunda, who got cut. It was going to happen.
That's right. It was another Spartan.
Yeah, she was going to be sort of like almost a Logan and Rogue relationship with George, but she got cut. So, and I originally it was going to be Kat was going to go off with Halsey, and
not June.
and
Okay.
yeah, and she was going to live, but it felt like, okay, which character do I absolutely love the most? And it was Kat by a mile, and it should be her, and not only that, but like she's the one who like that gives you the sort of up and down sort of like judgment look when you first arrive. Like she's like really kind of like you've got to work through almost the entire game to actually earn her respect and impress her, and in a way, like that moment happens in the elevator where she's she has her helmet off and she actually relates to you, and then you take her away. And so added the detail of she gets in the elevator, she misses the elevator button like we all do when we're in a rush. So like wanted to fill it with as many relatable moments as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I've seen people play through that and just huge, like, just intake of breath and like, no, and just the whole thing. It just really, it's an amazing thing, because that's another one of those cinematic moments that I really enjoyed being part of, crafting the timing and
oh
the whole
gosh,
thing.
yeah,
It was just,
absolutely, yeah. I mean, like, and because of the emotion, the music needed to be like spot on there.
wait. Were you almost going to compliment me on the music? Because you could be careful. Because
wait, were you
okay,
involved?
I read it the wrong way. Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
Moving on. So I want to talk a little bit. There's two things that happen that I want to get clarification on. One is, I thought that we had a cut. One of the missions that we cut was June and Halsey, and I thought in the mission where June and Halsey went off, I thought Halsey was going to survive, but of course Halsey would survive. But I thought June was going to die. Was there a June death that we cut, or never?
No, never. Like he went off with, he was escorting Halsey.
Right. And that was it. We never had a mission where he was going to die.
And with like Carter saying, like,
Yeah.
should she fall into enemy hands?
Right.
Yeah.
Boom. So there was never so because people are, I mean, apparently the people who at Halo Studios went on and wrote June into other stories, and June became a character in the future. For some reason in my head, I always thought June was
No, he's still out there.
okay. And then the other one is George's mother is not Halsey. Can you clarify why that misunderstanding happens, Mr. Britt?
because we hired a wonderful British voice actor.
Yes.
Was it Adwali?
Oh boy! Now I should have had the cast list here because I loved all those. That cast was
I
great.
always remember because he was in Grange Hill, which I watched as a kid. It was like,
oh yeah.
It was like, and he'd look younger than me. It was like, how can that be? Yeah. But he had a British accent, and as you know, when James Bond talks to Judi Dench, he says, "Mom."
Right. M-U-M, mom.
Not ma'am.
Right. Not ma'am. Mom.
Yes, mom.
And that was in the script, mom, and he said it perfectly. But
yes.
you'd be surprised how many American boys out there are like.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Which, it still surprises me because, like, do you think he in that moment would be that informal and call her mum?
Yeah, it was a surprise to me too. I wasn't expecting that misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Now, the other Camelot part of my time at Bungie was you and I. After you and I basically did the casting for Reach, and with Marcus's approval, but we sat there with all the different voice actors, and I think we sat in my studio and like, let's get these guys. And then I remember you and I going down. I know Freddie Bosch, who played Carter, was a friend of yours, and so
we were in acting class together. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to remember. Were you with me for all the Reach voice sessions, or
no? So
you were there for some of them.
Yeah. So my wife, it's incredibly inconvenient, decided to give birth to my son.
Now I remember.
I was like, really?
And I think I told you, no, you can't do that. You have to say.
So I missed the actual recording session.
Okay.
Yeah. So we did the casting.
But you were in LA with me because I remember that one funny story, and I honestly can't remember the guy's name. He's a famous actor, but we were at the bar at the Sunset Tower Hotel, and I had been there many times because number one, it's a good bar, but number two, that's where we stayed whenever I did voice acting, directing for all the other Halos, and then you and I were there, and we're at the bar. And I think we started up a conversation with some sort of short guy who was sitting next to us. And then after he left,
Jeremy Renner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said, you know who that is? And I said, no. And you said his name, and I still didn't know who he was.
And I think he either had just won the Oscar or was about to.
I think he had. I think.
Yeah. He might have been.
He was about to. It was for the, what's her name movie?
Hurt Locker.
Yeah, Hurt Locker. Yeah. Which I didn't see until after we met him at the bar. Super nice guy.
Very nice.
He's but I think you'd already seen Hurt Locker, and you were very impressed with that. So yeah, that was fun. Yeah. That's one memory I have.
I think why he didn't make an impression is because he didn't recognize you.
See, there you go. You had to get that in. No, the only other thing I remember about the working on that is that when Freddie Bosch came in, and of course he had been your friend, and we cast him, and he did great. But I guess you probably weren't there for the session. But at the session, and this is a little known fact, I don't know if I ever shared this with you before, he had to say the winter contingency.
Oh,
remember how important that line was?
Yeah.
And for some reason, it was one of those lines, one of those, series of syllables that he could not get out. And there was this panicky moment. I think
Benedict Cumberbatch and penguins, right? It was like, yeah.
So it was one of those things, and I was like, there was this moment where I'm like, am I going to have to like tell him thank you very much, thanks for coming, and then recast that part? And I was thinking, oh, but Lee, this is Lee's friend, and I like Freddie. He's really great. He's perfect Carter. But we took a little break. I think he came back and he was able to do it. But we didn't have a whole lot of usable takes for him saying it's the winter contingency. Like I should share that with you sometime.
And like
it's a tough line to say.
Oh,
but he couldn't. For some reason, he just got stuck on it.
And we gave Carter like the most ridiculous technical
Exactly.
like script. It was, yeah, all the stuff that he had to say was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Whereas, it's like, oh my gosh, casting Alona Tal
Oh,
as Kat was amazing, because I mean, like, she at the time we were thinking, oh, it's like either German, French, or Italian accent, and we saw the amazing actresses for that and like amazing accents, and then she came along,
yeah, she
and
was
like,
perfect.
yeah, and I was like, oh my gosh, it was like, and she kind of channeled her sort of colonel or something, and I
Well,
think,
she was Israeli and she had been in
yep,
military like everybody
yep,
in Israel
yep,
has to be, and she
yeah,
channeled, I think, her colonel, her
yes, yeah, or her colonel.
colonel. Yes,
I loved.
that's right. She does say it that way. Yeah,
Yes,
that's
yes,
beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because like the other thing, and I think what I really appreciated, and here comes a compliment, is that
Uh-oh.
like when I got back from paternity leave, it's like we had all those takes, and I one of the things that I really kind of wanted, and I was as many flaws that
Uh-huh.
we could get away with in delivery, because bullets are flying and shit
Sure.
like that, and you invited me, into your office, and we just went through all the takes, and it was like I appreciated that so much, and it was a great way of working with you. So I,
Well,
I
that's good. I'm glad you reminded me because I remember you and I working side by side. I couldn't remember if we were in I know we were there together for the casting, and then we were there
we
apparently
I
in the
I
post
did go
production
to. I think there was some more additional
pickups or something.
dialogue stuff as
All right.
well. Yeah, yeah.
And then the last thing, which I still thought was hilarious, is the AI voice in Reach. Was I remember seeing it in the script and it was like Antidot, and I'm like, what's Antidot? Like, what is this I'm casting for Antidot? I remember talking to you saying, why is this character called Antidot? And you said because she's like my Auntie Dot, and I'm like, what are you talking about? So explain Antidot.
So Auntie Dot. So like,
See, I'm not even saying it the right way because I read
yes,
it wrong. I didn't get
yes,
it.
yes, yes. So obviously we had Cortana,
Right.
voice and that kind of stuff, and so like it needed to be something completely different from Cortana.
Yeah, not one of the swords of Charlemagne or whoever that is.
Yes, yeah, and so like I wanted it to be really like, yes, it's an opportunity for like, oh, here's a bunch of information, so we don't have to have the characters saying it, but she rattles on a bit,
Yeah.
and like, and all the Spartans can then say, well, you know, kind of do what a lot of missions do, where it's a cinematic and then they sum it up, do a summary of,
Yeah.
in the
Say it again.
opening couple of lines.
Right.
So they were able to do that, but you kind of gave her a personality as an AI that they didn't necessarily need, because they're soldiers on the ground. So it was
Hmm.
like, it's a much different relationship. And my auntie Dot, God bless her, she was very sweet. But you get her on the phone and talking about her various procedures, and like, she gave that doctor a piece of her mind and all that kind of stuff. And like, you could literally just put the phone down and like, walk away, make a sandwich, and come back, and yeah. And so, it made sense to me, and was in my head that
So that was an
that
actual person from your
yes,
childhood, and
yes,
yes, and her name was Dorothy, but you called her Auntie Dot.
yep, yep,
Auntie Dot. Okay.
Auntie Dot.
So that's the other mystery solved that people have been wondering about. Lee, we went on together well, I mean, not, I forgot this part. I got to mention this part. So all the motion capture for the actors in all the cinematics in Reach, you were primarily the main director for those scenes, or am I Did you work with CJ on that? How did that work?
It was the first game where we used mocap.
Yeah.
So it was so we started out. It was Javier, who we got this mocap system. He set it up, and it was myself and Kurt and Javier just playing around with it. We even we didn't know what that we were doing at the time, but we even made a VCam.
I was going to say you did a virtual camera thing with it too. I
which
remember
was
that.
which was a marked up 2x4. And yeah, it worked. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, but the best thing for me was to be in the mocap suit and have them, and then I knew the moves and all that kind of stuff. I think certainly all the male characters were me. And then we got Deb. I don't know if you remember Deb.
No, I don't.
She was a theater actress who actually came in and with the animators, because she did stage combat.
Oh,
and
okay.
she was amazing, and so I was able to sort of work opposite her on a number of things as well. But yeah, I think the most complicated one was the in Sword Base with the scene with Halsey. I think she played Halsey and Kat, and I played all the other characters.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I see. That's another detail that people don't realize.
Well, plus at the time, we couldn't capture multiple people at the same time.
Right.
Yeah,
The system couldn't handle that.
Yeah,
That was before we had a legit mocap stage. It was in that other office building upstairs. I remember that.
It was, yeah. I do remember the novelty of wearing the mocap suit wore off real quick when you have to go to a meeting and walk down the street, and it's spandex.
Yeah, doesn't breathe.
Should be on actors and not developers.
Was that during the same period of time when we were carrying some weapons back and forth between that office building and 343 Studios?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Because I think the SWAT team of Seattle got called one time because one of our guys was carrying a sniper rifle down the street.
Yeah, that was probably one of the animators, I'm sure.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then you and I went on to the newer building, and we started working together on Destiny. And I'm not going to get into any of that. That should be we'll save that for an entire other show. I think you left Bungie not long before I did. I left in 2014. Do you remember what year it was that you left? Was it also 2014 or
2012? I think.
Was it that early?
Yeah, I think it was June of 2012.
Did you didn't leave before Joe did though,
No.
did you?
No.
So it might have been 2013 because I think he left in 13.
Okay.
But at some point you ended up going over where Jamie was, which was, believe it or not, just across the way, really.
Yeah, Sucker Punch.
Sucker Punch. And Jamie was already there working on Second Son, and you joined him on Second Son. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, he basically introduced me to a couple of guys over there, and one called Billy Harper, who is the animation director. And I don't know, it's I think for me personally, how I have traveled through my career, it's usually people, and I thought I got to work with this guy one day.
Yeah,
and it just happened to work out, and fortunately, he thought the same thing. So,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then you ended up working with Marcus again on a team studio that he built for a while, and you stayed with him on a couple different projects.
Yeah. Once again, yeah. Yep. So he's one of those people who basically builds teams around him, built on trust, respect, that kind of thing. And he's always seen more in me than I see in myself, and
Well, we've all seen a lot in you, Lee. You are amazingly talented, and you have brought literally so much to the table that we depended upon for all the Halos that we made. Other than, I don't think you probably worked on ODST, but you worked on everything else.
I gave my feedback on a plasma grenade arc.
And you and I both have achievements named after us. There's the Lee R. Wilson Memorial
That's
Award
right.
achievement that we for sticking a certain number of people with plasma, and there's the Play Like Marty Award achievement, which is apparently if you never fire your weapon and you always hang back and everybody else dies in front of you, you get the Be Like Marty Award, which is completely mean and unfair. So
I and I have to say that, especially starting at Bungie and coming in and going straight into those playtests, that was an exciting and intimidating experience.
Yeah. Actually, those are the play tests were fun. There was I remember before we shipped Halo 1, I've talked about this before, but there were 35 of us or something working on Halo, and I was one of the best 35 players in the entire world at that moment. Then as soon as it went out to the public, it was like, well, that was the end of that. But I was never as bad as people accuse me of. I was pretty good. I finished every game on Legendary, so I can play the game.
I think I could do that.
Yeah.
It's like all I know is that I could wind people up really well. And I think that's why I chose the plasma grenade. Because it was funny.
Yes, it is funny.
And also, I could never win a melee.
Sure.
But I could take you with me. Which you'll realize 3 seconds later.
Exactly, after the fact. No! But I think you could stick people across the map pretty good, too.
I loved it. It was like a 3-pointer.
Yeah. You were like the 3-point play guy. All right, Lee, we're way over what we should be doing. It's just so much fun to talk to you, and we'll have to do this again sometime. I hope people realize now, what a crucial, essential part of the entire Bungie Halo saga that you were. And best of luck to you in the future and all your other game projects that you're working on. We'll stay in touch.
Thanks for organizing this during my lunchtime.
Okay, you got it.
Now I feel like I want fried chicken. I don't know why.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right, thanks, Lee. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Cheers, Marty.